Hi, this is Eric from Otoy. In this video, we're going to take a look at solving some issues with displacement maps that you may encounter when you're first applying them to your model when rendering with Octane for Maya. So I have my head model here, and you can see here in the test render that we have a few issues. Number one, the displacement is a bit too exaggerated. We're seeing too many details here, or these wrinkles are too deep. And we're also seeing some artifacts here, like right here by the eye. So let's take a look in the hypershade, and there's a few things we can do to kind of try and fix this problem. So let's go to the displacement node. Let's move this off to the side so we can see it here a little bit better. And one thing I can do is let's set that height to something more like 0.7, something a bit more reasonable. So you can see the details look a little bit better, but we're still getting some artifacts. So the next thing we can try doing is we can change the level of detail. Right now I have it set to 4096 by 4096, which does correspond to the size of the texture map I used for the displacement map. But let's see what happens when we increase it to 8192 by 8192. And you can see it looks a little bit better. It's kind of lessened that artifact just a little bit. It's not completely gone though. Another thing I can try doing is I'll select my model, and I currently have it set to open subdivision level of 1. Let's see what happens when I set that to 2. So I'm going to subdivide the model 2 times at render time while Octane is rendering it. And let's hit the IPR button, make sure it refreshes. And it's starting to look a little bit better. It looks more like a natural wrinkle. We've lost a lot of the problems that we're having here just in the edge of the eyelid. So that looks a little bit better there. And we're not having as many artifacts. I'm going to zoom out here and see how our ear looks and our lips and the other parts. So a lot of working with displacement maps involve kind of tuning the model, balancing these settings, the height settings, the level of detail, and the subdivision level in order to achieve the best result. Now, the nice thing about this displacement map is we do have some fine detail coming through, which is great, like some of these wrinkles right here. So that's very impressive for just having a displacement map. I think what I'd like to do is select my sun sky node, so we can select it here in the background. Let's choose outliner. Select that sun sky transform, and let's set the power to 0.2 just so we can see the silhouette a bit more. And let's set the actual texture. Let's lower that. There we go. That looks better. Just want to see that silhouette. So we are getting a nice silhouette here. You can see where the bumps are really coming through quite nicely, and we are seeing some of that fine detail as well. But of course, skin has super fine detail, and I like to bring that out a little bit more in order to increase the realism. And I can do that by creating a bump map and using the bump map for the fine details as kind of a way to help out the displacement map in rendering the larger details. So here's a bump map I've created for the head using Photoshop. And if we zoom in here, you can see that it has a bit more of the fine detail, like the wrinkles and the pores and that kind of stuff, more so than just the displacement map. And in this case, it is a 16-bit image, 16-bit grayscale PNG file. So if I go into Maya, and let's bring over our render view here. So this is just the displacement map. So let's see what happens when we hook in a bump map. So I'm going to go into the hypershade. Let's move this off to the side here and zoom in. So select my glossy material and go to the bump channel and click on the checker box. This brings up the create render node window. I'm going to choose an Octane image texture, and with this texture selected, I will click on the folder icon, go to my head textures, and find that bump map and connect it. Now if I click on the render view, you can see that the bump is definitely more defined. However, it's a little bit too exaggerated. It looks a bit more like drywall than human skin. So we need to pull it back a little bit. If you notice with the bump map, there is no extra node. It's just It's just that the image node is directly connected to the bump node. So unlike displacement mapping, which has a displacement node, it's just the image node. So if I want to control the strength of that texture, one way I can do it is by simply selecting the image texture here and reducing the power. So if I bring the power down to something like 0.2, you'll see that the bump is still there, but it's not quite as exaggerated. Let me move this down a little bit. I'll just use this over here. So if the bump is at a power of 1 or 100%, it's very strong. And as I bring it down, you can see it's not quite as strong. So I can find kind of a happy medium where I think it looks good. So maybe something like, for this model, 0.279 or something like that. If for some reason you actually want to make the bump go stronger, you can actually set the power to a value above 1. You can see if I set it to 4, now the bump is really exaggerated and really strong. So that is one way you can go about adjusting the strength of the bump. So that's the basics of using displacement maps and bump maps in Octane for Maya.